My name is Melissa Bostrom, and I'm Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development in the Graduate School. And welcome to today's edition of the Alum Zoom series, 5 career questions with a Duke PhD. I want to acknowledge and thank my co-sponsor on this series, Molly Starback of the Office of Postdoctoral Services. And then let me turn to the main event for today. I want to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Erin Parish. She is Design Strategist for the City of Durham. She has been working for the City of Durham since July 2017. Prior to her current role, her experiences include, I'm just sharing a selection, serving as the Wake County Coordinator for the You Can Vote initiative in 2016, serving as a project coordinator and designer for the Social Stoplighting Project through the Duke Borderworks Humanities Lab, working as a research associate to evaluate small reconciliation projects in Northern Ireland, and serving as a community health educator in the U.S. Peace Corps. So again, this is just a sampling of her really fascinating experiences. She received a bachelor's degree in international relations and affairs from the University of Georgia, a master's degree in conflict resolution and reconciliation studies from Trinity College Dublin, and a master's degree in history and a PhD in cultural anthropology from Duke University. So with that, I want to give a warm welcome to Dr. Erin Parish, who's our guest today.
I don't know the last time someone's called me doctor, and I tend to hide all of that education. So it's like very rare. I'm working with the planning department on analyzing a bunch of qualitative data. And so that's when I'm like, okay, I have a PhD in this, but it's not rocket science. I can teach you and I can teach your 12-year-old. So that's kind of how I operate in the world. But thank you for that very kind introduction.
You're very welcome. So I try not to give away everything so that I wouldn't impinge on your answer to the first question, which is, can you tell us a bit about your background?
Yeah, so I mean, you heard the highlights from LinkedIn, but my background is really culture anthropology and community organizing. And where I'm seeing the two fit is how to use and incorporate participatory action research. And I think that's where a lot of the community organizing piece has come from, of like, how do you talk to people, understand people? How can you use data, qualitative and quantitative, to make better policy decisions? And so when it comes to voting and how elections work, that's quantitative and qualitative data and relationship building, in the same way as the work that I'm doing in the City of Durham now is very much like, when we think about engagement, when we think about working with residents, how do we honor the words that they have to say that that is something that could be fit into how we make policy decisions? So that's like a really, really broad, I've worked in a lot of different places. I've lived in a lot of different places. I definitely had the ethos of living and experiencing and relating internationally before I had any kind of desire to go to grad school. Most of where I've gotten now is complete accident with very little strategy. And here I am. And I'm a design and performance strategist, so you never know where you might end up.
So a strategist by accident. Okay, all right, great.
Absolutely, yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more specifically about how you got your current job?
Yeah, so I kind of segued into that because there was zero strategy involved there. So I looked for work for 2 years after I finished grad school, and I did not enter graduate school with any desires to get a tenure track job in anthropology. Like, I started off in history and ended up switching to anthropology. And I just thought it would be really cool to get paid to learn and to read and write. And it is, like, it's a complete privilege and honor and joy that everyone who is currently getting paid with healthcare to learn and write and read and teach, that's amazing, you know. So just enjoy this and soak Duke dry for all the resources and all the money that it probably still has. I mean, that's my like best advice to anyone at Duke. But yeah, so that I didn't go looking for just professor jobs when I got out. So I applied for professorial jobs if it seemed to really, really fit the kind of work that I did, if it was around conflict resolution, if it was around really like community-based research and things like that. And I looked for non-academic jobs. And like everything was wrong. Nobody ever trained me to look for a non-academic job. I was looking for maybe a year and a half. And when I was working for You Can Vote, one of the women I worked with was a professional resume writer. And she just rewrote my resume for free. She was like, this is a disaster. This whole CV thing is just ridiculous. So that's a piece of advice. Get someone professional who is non-academic if you are interested in non-academic jobs to rewrite your CV. Like, pay them if you need to, because you don't have those skills. Like, you've never gotten those skills, right? And this is not to say that Duke doesn't provide those skills, because they probably do, and they probably provide them more for undergrads, because undergrads are going into that more like professional role than graduate students. It's just not what our professors know how to provide us with. So I looked for all different kinds of jobs, and I was doing my organizing work, and I was adjuncting, and I was doing like a communications job with Haystack, which used to be based at Duke. And that was like, hey, we like you. Do you want to do communications? Do you know how to tweet? And I'm like, sure. So like everything I was getting was just basically my relationships with people. And I wasn't getting any of the jobs that I was applying for. And I even thought about taking my PhD off of my resume, because I knew that there were a couple of jobs that I didn't get because they saw I had a PhD and thought I could do their job, or I don't know, they've had a lot of thoughts, I'm sure. So when I ended up with this job, I was actually looking for a job for my niece. There was a summer youth internship program that the city does, and I was filling out her application for her, and the applications are terrible in the city. And I was like upset that I couldn't figure this thing out. And then I saw the job that I have that was posted. I'm like, what? It was like this human-centered design job, and it looked perfect. So I applied for it, and I got my job, and she didn't. So that's where I ended up with the job that I have.
Very interesting story, yes. So just to jump in for a quick clarification for all the grad students and postdocs who are on the call with us today, you certainly can take advantage of the Duke Career Center. They have a graduate services team who can help you with your resume. And for the postdocs on the call with us, Molly Starback is our campus expert working with postdocs on converting a CV to a resume. So we definitely do have those resources at Duke. Great.
No, and I mean, that's like, I think that, I mean, I worked at FHI for years in Smith Warehouse with the Career Center, like right there. And I just didn't think about it. I mean, seriously, I would tell undergrads all the time how to get to the Career Center because I sat like right below it. But it wasn't on my radar as a resource for me to use, because it wasn't anything that my peers were using. So I think that's a really important point of like, there are so many resources at Duke. And I think because Duke is so resource rich, we can lose sight of the resources that are there and the resources that will actually be useful to us. So this is basically like me plugging that, Melissa, like, do that, because I wish I did, you know? Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you for reinforcing that message. So tell us about kind of a typical day with the City of Durham, and both what that was like pre-COVID and then currently.
Yeah. So it's a 9-to-5 job, which is really different from academia, you know. It is a 9-to-5 business casual job, which took some adjusting. It would be a real mix, particularly over the 3 years that I was there. The first 2 years, I'd say I did a lot more community engagement, and I would do a lot more kind of in the field interviewing and facilitating and things like that, which I really, really enjoy. And that's kind of my anthropological training. So that's probably my favorite stuff. But then there was a lot of meetings. You have a lot of meetings. I think that's a big difference too. In a lot of academia, it's very solitary. And if that fits your personality, that's awesome. You know, it didn't actually fit my personality at all. And I was always trying to look for collaborative work and trying to get people to work collaboratively. And that's just not really what our system, especially in the humanities, is structured for. And so, you know, you want to pick work that feeds your soul and fits who you are as a person. So yeah, there's just a lot of meetings in figuring out how to move work forward, because a lot of the work that I do is in designing new programs or implementing new ways to do programs that already exist. And so a lot of that is just relationship building, of trying to get people to do things in different ways. Oh, and then post-COVID, it's a lot of Zoom meetings. It's this. I spent a lot of time doing this, which I'm sure all of y'all are doing too. And I have a couple of different projects that I'm working on now. Is there a time for me to describe what my work has been in the past 3 years?
I think now would be a perfect time to build that.
Yeah, okay. So my work started off as part of a Bloomberg Philanthropies funded innovation team. And the idea around that was using quantitative and qualitative data, and I kind of added community engagement into it to design policies and programs that fit people's real needs. And so we started off with a priority area that the mayor and city manager decided on, and that was improving economic opportunities for justice-involved residents. And so when we were working with Bloomberg and under that Bloomberg structure, it also came with a $400,000 grant to implement pilots of the projects that we would design. And so when the first year and a half of that, Bloomberg had a very specific design structure, which was research, come up with ideas, prototype and test, refine, and then try to like actually institute this thing that you've created that no one has asked you to create, which is the kicker to it. But we ended up with 3 projects that came out of that first piece of work. The first was a driver's license restoration program and expungement program, and we ended up getting, I think, 50,000 people their driver's license charges that were over 2 years old, they had suspended and revoked licenses. Those were wiped from their record if they happened in Durham County. So that was a collaboration with the district attorney's office and the district court. So we're also working with the district court to get their fines and fees waived. And so that's a 2-year process. We're probably at about $2 million worth of fines and fees waived. Then we have a program called Welcome Home, and that is a peer support program for folks their first month or so coming home from prison, and that is entirely run by people who are justice involved themselves. And then the second is a supportive jobs, or the third is a supportive jobs program for folks who are recently out of prison as well, and that's a like more high touch, has about 6 months of supportive services in getting city jobs, getting supported and being able to thrive in those jobs. And then I think we ended up having 9 people complete the program and 8 got full-time jobs with the city, and the 9th didn't because he didn't have his GED yet, and so we're working with him to get his GED. So all of those projects came from and were designed from a lot of in-depth research that was very qualitative heavy. We talked to over 150 people, and the majority of that were justice involved residents, and we followed the Bloomberg design process, and I learned a lot about that and how to do that, which was really interesting, and coming up with like very specific insights from the research that then we could use as building blocks to design programs. And I think that if we hadn't have used that process, for example, if the job is improve, or if the task is improve economic opportunities, then you're going to make a jobs program. Like that's the first place you're going to go. But actually through the qualitative research, driver's licenses kept coming up. It's like people weren't getting jobs because their driver's licenses were revoked or suspended. And then we were able to make this collaboration with the DA's office, and they were already doing this work, and they wanted to be able to expand it. And so it was right place, right time. So yeah, so that is a cool aspect of that kind of work. It doesn't work as well when you don't have that kind of funding to pilot projects, and it doesn't work as well when things are not directly within the discretion of the city. So we did a 1.5 years on working on jail work and trying to reimagine the jail, and nothing worked with that because it was the county and there wasn't actually a desire to do that work. And now we have transitioned off the Bloomberg grant. And so I'm specifically working within the city. And I've been working on we're writing a new comprehensive plan, which is how the city makes the rules for development and how we grow over the next 30 years. And so we're working on the community goals around that, and then policies will be built from the goals. And so there was a large engagement process of about 1,000 people that happened between November and February. And so I'm working with the team to analyze all of that data and make draft objectives from that. And then I'm supporting a lot of our organizational racial equity work. So we have a program looking at our fines and fees, and we're going to look at 3 fines and fees to propose ideas around reform to decrease the financial burden on our communities of color. And then I'm working in our organizational racial equity team to build a toolkit, like a decision-making toolkit using racial equity. So that's what I do.
Those are wonderful summaries. Thank you so much for telling us in detail about those kinds of projects. I think that's really helpful. No, I think that's wonderful to really hear how your research can bloom into social justice impact, and then also where the obstacles are. So I think that's very useful. And I want to encourage folks to post questions in the chat too, now that we have that really specific information. So a couple of things that I've heard through lines for you, Erin, as you've spoken, you talked a lot about relationships, building relationships, and that's been a piece that's helped you be successful both in graduate school and then also in your current role. Are there other ways that graduate students and postdocs could prepare for this kind of work themselves while they're in their current roles? What else would you recommend they do to develop skills or just explore further?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to actually be strategic about this that I wasn't, you know. I think looking for the kinds of jobs that you think might be interesting to you, or like understanding the skill sets that you have, and then seeing what non-academic jobs are out there very early on, and then seeing the qualifications and requirements that they have for those jobs, and spending some of the time that you have at Duke getting some of those skills, because this is a very protected space that you're in right now to gain a lot of different skills. And Duke is very open to you being able to take classes in different departments and different schools. And there's like a ton of like library workshops of learning how to like use Tableau or do this and that. So I'd say think about, and I'm saying this as a cultural anthropologist, like I don't know what y'all's backgrounds are, but we don't leave with a lot of marketable skills or a lot of understanding how our skills are marketable outside of teaching ethnographic methods at a liberal arts college, you know? I mean, honestly, but there's a lot of things that we can do. So I'd say like, if I were to do it over, I would make sure like I knew how to use qualitative research tools. Maybe got some more web design skills. I would want to leave with like really strong Excel and like PowerPoint deck making skills. There's a lot of like basic professionalization of getting a job that you can do at Duke, and it'll actually help you, I think, with your research, whatever that is. And it's also nice to have a break from whatever like very intense focused thing you are working on is, to do something like learning how to use Excel better. I don't know, learning basic graphic design. It'll help you with all aspects of your life. So that's one recommendation. And then like interning, getting real applied skills is crucial. And, I wrote grants for stuff. So the whole social stoplighting project, I wrote a grant for after I came back from Columbia. And I got like undergrad student assistants who came to Columbia with me. I got all kinds of money for all kinds of things that I did as a grad student. There's a lot of money out there for you.
So those persuasive writing kinds of opportunities, I think, sounds like are still pertinent in your role now then. Yeah. Great. So tell us, and it's fine to say you don't know, what is the employment outlook like? Maybe you can talk about the City of Durham. I don't know whether you have a sense of kind of the broader local government hiring outlook.
I mean, I think that there are still growth areas, I mean, there's still jobs out there right now. I think there's a lot of jobs in tech right now. There's a lot of jobs in different science fields. I mean, I think thinking about what we know that we're going to need in the future, we're going to need people who know how to work in public health. We're going to need people who know how to innovate. We're going to need people who have skills in sustainability and thinking about resilience and all of the different manifestations that resilience will take in the future. So I don't think that I can say like, oh, there are these options at the City of Durham, and like y'all don't all want a job at the City of Durham. It's not about that. It's about thinking about what kinds of other professional options might exist from your skill sets and the things that give you joy, and then figuring out how to find a job in those fields, which is real. And so I think some of that is like, how can you sit and future cast a bit? Like, how can you think about like where are the spaces where people have like real knowledge gaps, because we're at this moment of extreme transformation, right? Like we're at this moment of radical world transformation. And so there's a lot of space in which whatever your skill sets are could fit into this moment in a really powerful way. And so I'd say being able to like take some time in this moment to think about like where you want to insert yourself in this world changing moment, what skills you think you would need to be able to insert yourself well, and then get those skills. So that's not like the most specific, I guess, piece of advice, but that's what I would do, not knowing where y'all are in your lives, professionally, personally, or whatever.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So just for everybody on the call, what I want to do next is turn to some of the questions that came in through the registration. And I see some questions coming up in the chat too. And so I'll try to hook those together as we go and bring them up as well. So one question that came in from registration was, what made you realize that your current job would suit your skill set and goals? You mentioned seeing the job description and saying that kind of aha moment.
Yeah, so with a lot of the work that I had done with my field work, when I came back and tried to understand what I was doing, I realized that it was human-centered design. And so when I saw this job was, and I ended up like teaching classes on human-centered design. I had like zero training. I like read some books. But when I saw the job, I'm like, oh, that's actually what I do. And I saw a question there of, did my the thesis fit the things that I was talking about? No. What I did was two separate things. So with my field work, I was like, I want to do something. My dissertation was on the physicality of memory, and how like places where war and traumatic things happen, how it's embedded in space, and how the changing and the transformation of space can have like individual or social healing aspects and the limits to that. That was because that was fascinating to me and like remains really interesting to me, but it's a much more theoretical thing. And it's like these folks were coming home from being displaced after years and years and years, and they didn't need to read that. They would never read that. This was not for them, right? This was for me. And that's real. And so I was like, well, I want to do something that can really help the community that I'm in. And so I found a project which ended up doing, it was like participatory planning and rural community development, that I helped structure all of that work. And so and the methodology that they would use on their participatory planning processes. And it was really successful, and I worked on it for years, and that's what got me my job. And I knew, and it was a participatory budgeting project, and we now do participatory budgeting in the city. So I knew when I was doing this, and when I was building a website instead of writing an article, and when I was like creating this group of people doing this work together, I'm like, this will get me a job. And when I had my job interview, I presented on it and I got the job. So, I mean, it just depends on your energy level and desire level. I could have been super strategic and written my dissertation on that. So.
Great, thank you. So the next question that came in, do you feel like you need to know design thinking in your current job? And how could graduate students and postdocs, build their skills or demonstrate an interest in design thinking?
Yeah, I think design thinking is actually really marketable. and anyone can do it. IDEO has some really good, so IDEO.org, they've got some really good classes that you can take. They're like modules. I think they're $500 a pop. I'd say try to get some money from your department or from the graduate school to fund those. But you can do both of them and get some sort of certificate on LinkedIn about human-centered design. So they're really helpful, but I just like read a bunch of like field manuals from IDEO, and then I ended up getting trained on the job by doing things wrong. I think there is a lot of stuff that you can learn by being taught, and is there a human-centered design class at Stanford or at Sanford? There might.
I'm not sure. I don't know if there's a Stanford student on the call with us to tell us.
Also look at other departments. So look at the business school. Like the business school is going to be front and center on this. Oh, innovation, entrepreneurship, or Sanford. And think about the skills that you want to get and then where they might be happening in other departments besides your own.
All right, I want to jump to a couple of other questions that came in through the chat. So I want to just point out to everybody that Rachel submitted a suggestion to look at a chapter in The Professor is In, for a list of skills that you've been gaining throughout your experience, in case, so that folks have that kind of list in front of them. Then there was a question, do you think folks need additional degrees in order to pursue a career like yours?
Please don't do that. Don't spend more money and more time in your life in this space. You are strong, intelligent people on this call. Do not let what graduate school does to you take that away from you, right? It can take away your confidence and your voice and your sense of self. And this is real. What you need are some specific skills, probably which Rachel held up in that book, right? There are people who have spent some time working on this. Figure out what skills you need to get a job that might be a 9-to-5 job with 2 weeks of vacation, and have that as an option. Have that as an option and get those skills. And all of those things exist at Duke. You have all of those things that you can get for free. People like Melissa are there to help you. I mean, you're on this call, so you know that, right? But they're like all these people here to help you. And a lot of times, like undergrads will resource that help. And then graduate school is super isolating, right? And we're taught to be very myopic in like what we study and how we exist. And so, I mean, there is a choice in that. And so I'd say just suck Duke dry for all it has to give you, because it has a lot.
So there was kind of a related question to that, question about more degrees, and that is, how would you advise students who are looking to switch contexts? So international to US domestic, for example, especially in the kind of community-based work you're talking about.
I switched international to domestic. So my work was on like post-conflict reconstruction, reconciliation, human rights, and I jumped at the job because it was around incarceration, and like those are human rights issues. So the interviews that I would be having with folks who'd been locked up, folks who had been in gangs, like it was just like interviews that I would be doing with someone who had been in the FARC or someone who had been in a paramilitary in Northern Ireland. Like it's the same exact physiological reaction in front of you. So I was actually very well trained for that. And I think like when I'm doing the comprehensive plan now, this was the same kind of work that I was doing in Spanish in a place with landmines, like literal landmines. So it's like, okay, like I can do this. It'll work or it won't, but I mean, it's all very, very transferable. So I think that's the, like, if there's a moral or there's a through line, you have a lot of skills and you have a lot of access to get even more skills. So you just have to figure out how to like reframe and code switch some, and you have people who are there to help you do that. And you also have this alumni network that I never reached out to. So I mean, this is exciting, but you have people who are out there who've done the work who can help you or maybe want to give you a leg up, So this is all part of, I guess, the theme of, do a asset mapping of all the things that Duke can offer you and then go for it.
Great, excellent. And related to asset mapping, there's a note in the chat here about the new Innovation and Entrepreneurship graduate certificate. So
Cool. Yeah.
folks who are graduate students can check that out and pursue that new opportunity. So Erin, for our final question, I'm going to sneak one in. So what do you think is next for you? How do you imagine your transition, you know, after your current role?
I mean, there's no hurry for me to get out of my current role. I mean, I'm still a nerd, you know, so I kind of feel like I'm just in this space where I'm learning so much and I'm learning so many new things, and it's a very supported space. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind doing teaching again, being in a more academic space again at some point. But honestly, I feel like I have a lot to learn about how to really implement participatory action research in a policy space. And I'm in a really great laboratory where I have all these great students who are like in the planning department, in the transportation department, and I'm teaching them how to do I'm teaching them qualitative methods in a way that no one has ever taught me, you know, like, and it's effective and people are learning it. So I think, you know, I'd probably bounce from this once I feel like my learning space is done and there's an opportunity that could be a good opportunity for growth for me to teach and write and think more. Maybe go back to some of the work around my dissertation around trauma and healing and the physicality of that. So that's still a space I'm very interested in. I think nothing is ever lost. It just sometimes incubates.
Well, I think it's a lovely sentiment to end the conversation on today. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences and perspective with us today. Thanks for everybody who joined us on the call. And Erin, is it okay for folks to reach out to you on LinkedIn to connect?
I was just gonna say, and if you've got my email, Melissa, you have my email. Hold on, I'll just put it in the chat too. You can reach out on LinkedIn, but I will respond quicker if you email me. Which I will. Okay. Okay, that's me. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Let's join in a virtual round of applause for Dr. Erin Parish today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it.
All right, take care, everyone.